26th. Welcome to the July 26th Transportation Committee meeting. Let's see, on the agenda, we are able to see it. I'm trying to log in from my desktop and I'm currently on my phone and I am not able to turn on video on my phone for some reason. Okay, well, let's first go to the first update, which I believe is Beck Ashby. Beck, are you prepared to give us an update?
Yeah, right. And my main purpose for being here is later on in the agenda, but just an update on the RTPO. This year, we are working on our Human Services Transportation Plan, which is the transportation plan for people with limited transportation ability, handicapped people, low-income folks, the elderly, and we will be bringing a draft of that before our board in August, and then we need to have it approved in October. So we've been working on that. We've also been working on freight corridor designations and some railroad issues. Some of these things do not apply to Kitsap. As you know, we're the only county that belongs to two different organizations. PSRC is our MPO and the Peninsula RTPO is our RTPO. We belong to both. Those are the highlights of the work we've been doing to date. We will, the next thing we are working on is putting together our legislative folio or educational opportunity with our legislators, which we will be talking about later. Not being a member of your council anymore, I didn't feel it appropriate for me to answer this on your behalf. I thought we needed your input on it. So thank you, and I look forward to reviewing that in just a little while.
I guess we can go to the cycling club here and I see Amy Lawrence has joined us. Chris, if you could bring her over as a panelist.
Okay. Let's see here. Participants.
Do we want to jump to the cycling club and then come back to these other items on here?
Yes, that's sure. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm speaking. Okay, I can't. Yes, welcome to the visitors. And this is generally a committee meeting, but we are happy to have you as guests. It's generally not a discussion forum, though. It's just we invite your input, and we're happy to hear from the West Sound Cycling Club. And who's going to be giving the presentation? Is it Paul, or is it Amy, or is it Diane?
Diane is primary, and I'll chip in when needed.
Chris, will you be able to bring Amy over?
She's
over.
I think she
No,
is.
she's still in attendees.
She might be doing it from her phone, so she might not be on video. So thanks for joining. I'm Diane Iverson. Are you ready for it?
Should we share the screen?
Yeah, we'll share the screen.
Okay, so they have to enable that.
All right, let's see if I can get that figured out.
I'm glad to see other people struggle with some of this stuff because I'm constantly struggling.
So I've got one participant can share at a time. So what do I need to do from there?
Just
A host and panelists. Here we go.
No, just click the multiple participants can share.
Fred,
Okay. That's clicked. So hopefully you can hit the share screen and it works.
Well, let's try it again. Here we go. So we want this one. Okay. There we go.
all right. Well, I'm Diane Iverson, and I'm married to Paul Dutke, and the two of us, and maybe with Amy Lawrence, are going to present to you some ideas today about how to see life through the eyes of a cyclist. And first, we'd like to thank you for all the great work you did with the story walk last week. We were able to participate with Amy Lawrence and David Lawrence, and we got an opportunity to meet 3 of your council members, your mayor, and to listen to the past about Port Orchard and the present and the wonderful vision you have for Port Orchard along the waterfront. The reason that we'd like to be here today is we love Port Orchard. We live about 10 minutes away if we don't have a traffic jam. but we'd love to figure out how to connect our communities in a way where we don't have to hop in a car and bring our bike over to Port Orchard and then park it and then do a ride, which is the current approach that we use. Now, Amy and David live just outside your city limits, and they venture out straight from their driveway, but we don't. We hop in a car. I am vice chair of the Leaf Line Trails Coalition on the Bremerton Complete Streets Committee, and I'd like to show you before I go on to the next one, Paul.
Yeah.
The next one. Before I go on to talk about what we observe in Port Orchard and the vision that you have, I wanted to share over the last 5 years what has occurred in Bremerton. Under the mayor's leadership, he has done a great job of corridor planning around bike and pedestrian and cars. And the corridor planning has brought key stakeholders to the community to come together to figure out, how do you want Warren Avenue, State Route 303 from the Naval Base all the way out to Riddell? How do we want that to look? And what are the phased in projects over the next 20 years that we need to apply for grants? And then what is the non-motorized transportation aspect of it? And if you look at this map, 5 years ago, the only part of this that was dark blue, which is existing, is along Charleston. The rest of it in the last 5 years is in different phases of either getting completed this month. The dark blue is everything that's completed. The light blue is everything that's in planning phase. And the turquoise blue is in discussion phase before planning. But a network for bike and pedestrian is only as good as the city's boundary lines. And we have almost as much passion as you do about how to connect our community like you want to connect your neighborhoods in your community. We just like to make sure that there's some route that's safe between Bremerton and Port Orchard. So our club, go back one slide, Paul.
Okay.
Go back one more. Our club loves to ride your pathway along the waterfront. And we are so excited that you have this goal of taking it all the way out to Annapolis. This is our club, and you've probably seen us come through. We generally ride Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And Port Orchard is one of our favorite places to take new members, because you actually have a ride out to Manchester that is not full of a lot of hills climbing. And when people are just getting back on a bike, that's a wonderful addition. Connectivity within Port Orchard and connectivity to the city of Bremerton is our main focus today. An opportunity knocks. You guys have this great activity center downtown that's on your vision, and you have WashDOT, who's going to help elevate the highway 166 going into Port Orchard. And they
aren't providing a role in that at all. That's solely us. It is their road, but we're doing that project.
You are. And what we heard today in a training session from WashDOT is with the new legislation that says all state routes within cities need to have a complete streets component. That they haven't figured out exactly what that means, but it's everything over $500,000. So that is 166 that you have there, and there may be a way to get this new legislation to be an asset toward your project, because 166 goes all the way into Gorse, and then you have the Gorse project. But I'll let Paul share with you slides about the details of what we've observed as we come through on this great path of yours.
Yeah, well, this slide just shows that the Gorst project may include a Jarstead Park to Kitsap Lake component, and the box extends all the way out to the city of Port Orchard as far as what they're going to consider for upgrading. And then you have, as Diane alluded to, you've got this beautiful path out to Southworth, which is really a regional draw. And then you've got the shared use path, and you've got projects that you've been enhancing at Port Orchard Boulevard and Tremont and part of Sydney. And as it really is beginning to build a complete route to the Cushman Trail and Gig Harbor. So mostly what I want to focus on is the region right on your waterfront. So what you've got coming is what looks like, according to the scale that they give, an 18-foot unobstructed shared use path through the new development that you're planning for the community event center. But and here it's got a scale, and it says bike and pedestrian path. Our concern is that there really isn't what would be considered a shared use path or bike facility along the waterfront at this time, and there isn't really a bike facility getting to this new path. So these are the two issues at turquoise here that we want to address. Now, the problem that we see it partly is that you've got a zillion different jurisdictions involved in all of
I can answer your question and what our plans are for at least for the Bay Street East. We have a grant and we're beginning the design of that. So that is in our plans, and it'll connect us from the ferry terminal, or actually from the community center, because the community center is going to build a segment of this. And then the route or how it constructed is under we've got a federal grant for a situational study, a public process, and to design the connection that gets us to the boulevard. And then the boulevard is really pretty easy because we've got a underutilized 3-lane road that could be a 2-lane, easily be a 2-lane road, which gives us the option for bike paths and pedestrian amenities going up and down the boulevard to tie us into Tremont, which has those amenities.
Yeah, I didn't know that you'd study that. Is this generally the route along the highway that you're planning to connect it?
We don't know. We don't know. We've got a grant to figure out the best route.
Okay.
And start that design, and then we'll have to add resources to that, and of course then find funding to build it. So we're in the study phase right now of that.
Awesome. So what I want to do is actually start on this screen on the very right and go to where the community event center shared use path is, and these are just observations. So I'm not trying to be directive. It's just there's things that I think should be brought up and maybe looked at. So when you take that walk, what we noticed was that the vehicles are overlapping the shared use path by 2 feet, and your trash cans are in the way for 2 feet. And so your functional route is generally 6 feet. And wherever you have like here in the lower right, wherever you have a tree planter, you lose at least 1.5 feet, and then your 10-foot planking extends out under the fence where you can't walk on it. So I was, one solution would be these wheel stops that you could put in the, just right now in the parking lot, and prevent this overlap and give yourself a whole lot more room for the shared use path. The other observation was all the scooters of the kids that are just streaming off of the waterfront park shared use path. They will go straight through the middle of the parking lot because they really can't use this rough boardwalk very easily. So, so here's again a picture of the loss of width here. So 10 feet is the minimum width for a shared use path, and the feds want 12 to 14 ideally now is the new standard. So if you look underneath, I just, you notice this is all unutilized now, these sections that stick out, and the boardwalk is all on cement bases with wood supports, and this looks pretty sturdy, but it's also clear that you can extend 2 feet out, probably with your shoreline management program, and be okay, because it certainly does here. So we looked around for just things to kind of get a sense of what was possible. And so we went to Port Angeles and looked at their steel supports with I-beams and an elevated decking, which lets light through. That's just something we saw. Same thing in Port Townsend. They put an elevated boardwalk along part of their waterfront, which steel supports and steel bases. So it'd be possible to create or recreate the boardwalk with smooth cement panels like here at Seuss Creek, and just extend it a little bit further out, and you could get a really wonderful 10 to 12 foot boardwalk. That would be just what we would find ideal. This is an aerial view. I'm just showing in places where you actually have limited down to 6 feet for your boardwalk in a lot of places. So when you were on the left panel, you're sitting on the boardwalk and you're looking towards the Port Orchard Ferry, where you have a 10-foot path, and the rest of this is over riprap. So if you were to, and I just photoshopped the image, this area up here where when the ferry arrives, this is just jammed with people that are streaming out and filling in with buses here. It would be a lot more comfortable and a lot cleaner for the boardwalk if actually this area were you extended the sidewalk this far all the way to the Port Orchard Ferry Terminal. So I mean, we're not aiming to be directive, just thoughts about what's possible. Looking at it from the other side, this is an area that you could easily extend the boardwalk and make this a much more comfortable space for transit and pedestrians and cyclists and people moving this way. So in the upper, if you look here, I with a white line, I've outlined what could be the potential width, like a 12-foot path all the way across this upper area. And the magenta is where if you fill this in, you'd gain a much more open transit loading area here, because this is all part of the east-west bike route. So Port Angeles has a 12-foot unobstructed boardwalk in this location, and they've solved the overlap of the vehicles by diagonal parking. So basically the right front wheel of all these cars stops the cars from overlapping the boardwalk. So that's one possibility to keep in mind. So this area here where it says 6 feet, this is basically the only way east to the waterfront park from the west side of the waterfront. And it's limited with all these posts and this stop sign. And so everybody from the ferry, when they unload, just stream right through this 6 feet. So obstructions in your existing boardwalk are something that probably is remediable in a lot of situations. And one of the things I also want to bring up is that if you were going on the one-way road through your parking lot where the marina parking is, and you were to sit where this magenta X is, you see the library down below, and you can move left or right. Well, it turns out there really isn't any way through on the right, and the left, you're encountering all of those obstacles that we pointed out earlier to get down the boardwalk. So we were thinking, if you just had a bike pedestrian suggested route through here, it'd be fairly simple to create a ramp. You have a small sidewalk, which I think that falls off on a curb. There ought to be a way of actually punching this through so that somebody on a trike or a scooter could just roll onto this one-way direction and just head straight to the boardwalk this way. The difficulty being is that this is all private property, but you'd have to ask them, but so this is their parking lot, so to speak, but there could be an easy way through here. So we're almost, actually, I'm almost done with these slides. So one concern about the boardwalk, again, in magenta, it's areas that you could widen. If you look at the community center plan for shared use path, they actually overlap this lawn by 4 feet, which is what I came up with as a possibility to get through here. The other issue is some of the fire hydrants. You have 3 fire hydrants right in the middle of your walk path. And if this area here, which is the same as this little triangular magenta area here, if this were extended, then all of these obstructions wouldn't be as significant because you're opening up much more territory over on this side, on the left. So pointing out 2 other fire hydrants. And basically, I was unfamiliar with, you have plans for this, but it would seem to me that going along the waterfront is sort of prohibitively difficult, but some sort of bike facility along SR 66 here, 166 would be useful. So I'm turning it over. Any questions, by the way? I ran through this pretty fast.
I will let you know that initially our pathway project heading to Annapolis had replacing the boardwalk in it, but our funding that we received was 10 years ago. And what what it pays for today versus 10 years ago doesn't go as far. And so it's one of the things that we had to cut out of the project was replacing that boardwalk at this time, so that, and we're still have a funding gap on the segment from West Bay Center to get to Annapolis. So it is in our plans. It is currently a Port of Bremerton facility. It's not our facility, that boardwalk. It was built by the Port of Bremerton. So the garbage cans you're referring to belong to the Port of Bremerton. Mark Dorsey, who's not with us anymore, for former Public Works Director, and I have talked about changing that parking and reconfiguring that parking along there and making it angle in, or the curb stops, but it's a little more in depth than that, because then we have two-way traffic there, and we need to make it one-way traffic and reconfigure the flow of the parking lot. But it is something we've had conversation about.
So I do want to, I skipped this slide earlier, but it may not, if the state isn't involved in elevating 166, then they may not see the need here. But basically, with their new funding, they are directed to include complete streets planning. And you don't have a bike facility that connects Port Orchard Boulevard to Annapolis. And I'm thinking that since 166 doesn't offer any bike facilities at all through here, there may be some avenue for basically the state to help you with the funding to create a boardwalk that would create.
We're not doing all of 166. We're doing one block. We're raising one block 1.5 feet.
Right.
From Frederick to Geiger, and we are building a complete street there. It'll have underground utilities. It's going to have enhanced sidewalks. It'll have bike lanes. It'll have a median down the center. So it will be a complete street. We've got $1 million in federal funding for the design, and we've got a federal award for about 2/3 of our construction. So
that's great. The image that I had
project though.
The image that I had showed parking and one lane in each direction. It didn't show a bike lane, so that's cool.
Mayor, I think that there was not right of way to do a bike lane from Robert Geiger to Frederick. It is a complete street except for the bike lane, because in our non-motorized transportation plan, the bike lane is the shared path, which is waterward of the buildings going around the back of 7-Eleven. So that's what's in our plans right now, but you're correct. It is only the one block. And there is no right-of-way phase to the funding that we received. We received money to elevate the road within the existing right-of-way. And so we don't have the ability to widen the road. And there is not sufficient width to add bike lanes in the existing right-of-way, especially through the rest of downtown as well, where the buildings come right out to the property line.
Yeah, and I would add to that we are designing the roadway to accommodate on-road bicycles. We're looking at reducing the speed limit to 20 miles an hour, adding some curvature and things to reinforce that. We're providing when the parallel parking, when the doors open, we're providing extra width to make sure that we don't have bicycles streaming into doors. And so bicycles are being considered in the design. We just aren't going to have bike lanes on the street.
Okay. Do you want to wrap up, Diane?
Yeah.
This?
We, West Sound Cycling Club is sponsoring a bike policy ride, which is outlined here on the map, connecting Bremerton to Port Orchard on September 7th at 9 a.m. The purpose of the ride is to educate the key stakeholders in this vicinity of what is working well as it relates to riding a bike around here in Kitsap Way. If you've had an opportunity to go to downtown Bremerton in the last few weeks, it is almost completed up to SR3. So we will be riding up Kitsap Way to show people what it feels like to ride in that location. And then we will be going around Auto Center Way and down onto SR3, down to Gorse. We'll also be taking a short out and back to show people what Sherman Heights looks like as a bike route. And then a little out and back to Jarstead Park to show people about the possibility of that being an access to Kitsap Lake as a shared use path. And then around Gorse and onto SR3 and into Port Orchard. At this point in time, we have Mayor Wheeler will be the first speaker to highlight what's going on in Bremerton, what just got completed, and the vision for creating an east-west, north-south bike infrastructure. We are inviting speakers to speak at different locations along the way, and we'd love to have the city of Port Orchard participate, because it will be Port Orchard that will be at the end of our ride. I'll be sending an invitation to the mayor and to council members and any staff that would like to participate. We anticipate people from the Navy on the bike ride. And most important is that District 3 County Commission race will have the top two go-getters. And much of this is county obligation, and we'd like to educate the new people coming out of the primary as to how unsafe the county portion of this route is. So WashDOT is going to participate and have a couple of people talk about this new legislation that has an effect on state routes, and specifically about the projects going on in this area.
And e-bikes. So-
And anybody that's in this meeting that would like to participate is totally welcome to do it. We promise to make it safe. There are some locations that are unsafe in this route, and we know them because we will only do it on a Sunday currently. And we will have some safety measures in place so that people come out of this as alive at the end of the route as they are at the beginning.
And we have enough members with e-bikes that we probably can supply some for it, because it's an 18-mile total ride.
So we would definitely love Port Orchard on your end to either participate in the ride and or be a speaker about your great work that you have in play on the waterfront. Because it is awesome. And I'm sure you feel like we do, is that Kitsap Peninsula is one of the most beautiful places in the state of Washington. We enjoy living here, and we just want to make it more livable and with a thriving economy. So,
Okay, I think we're done then, right?
yeah.
Oh, and
Hi, this is Amy Lawrence. I just wanted to say thanks, Paul and Diana's excellent work on your part, and to showing all the different areas and the possible solutions. I just want to emphasize, my husband and I ride the foot ferry over to Bremerton with our bikes often. We were on it today, actually, just getting back from a bike trip to Canada. Every time we're on this foot ferry, there are probably at least 3 or 4 bikes coming from Bremerton to Port Orchard, and you get off that ferry and you're walking your bike, to get out, but you get off and just to emphasize, that whole sidewalk is just full of people and buses, and you really don't know where to go. There's no indication that your bike is at that point. Where do? You go through the parking lot. So then you go onto the city street, and that's also at rush hour. Totally, there's just so much traffic and cars that are backed up all the way, down to Gorse practically, people coming into the city. And then you've got bikes, that there's no room for them, and they're taking up space because there is no other space for them, and the cars are getting frustrated. So I just want to say that solving that issue for that foot ferry, for cyclists to know where can they be, give them some signage, maybe they're supposed to go through the parking lot. I don't know, but you really are, it's very unclear and very unsafe for everybody to have all those bikes, pouring off the ferry, and then there's no place for them to go. So I just
thank
wanted
you,
to mention that.
Diane, for your presentation. That was very useful. Can you email us the copy so we can have it for reference?
Yeah, I think I sent Chris a copy.
Okay, great. And we'll share that with council members. You've certainly given us a lot of food for thought, and it's very helpful to see this from a bicyclist perspective. As a pedestrian, I can say that I've always thought of the boardwalk primarily as a pedestrian facility. And I can see that it's certainly not wide enough to accommodate both pedestrians and bicycles. But thank you once again for your presentation. And we will now go on to the next agenda item, which is the
Councilmember Ching, if I may, I've just got a couple little things that I'd just like to share, other plans that are bicycle and pedestrian related. We are designing a multimodal path on Old Clifton out in the McCormick Woods area that parallels Old Clifton Road in the city limits. We also have pedestrian improvements out there on Sydney Road related to the new construction, and bicycle improvements related to that new construction there, which feeds out into the Ruby Creek area. And I believe, Chris, we've got a grant application. We're looking at how to make a bicycle route to the Forest Park area that would get us to from the traveling from south to north to get you to the county campus, not just to the boulevard, but a route through those older residential area and create a route through there. That's something that and then our long-term, at least my goals, and a council member Clausen shares this vision with me, is as we build the community center and the library moves out, we're going to surplus that building, and I would like to see it end up in Transit's hands, and that Transit would like to rebuild and create a proper transit facility there, because we do have a lot of people and cars and buses there that don't work well together, and we recognize that.
Great.
And Mayor, I was going to add to your list, we're getting ready to design Bethel Phase 1. And so the Bethel Corridor has full bike lanes throughout that area as well. And if I could, I would share, we have a non-motorized plan in our comprehensive plan, which I've put up on the screen here. All right, maybe the sharer has to stop sharing.
Okay.
And so we do have a complete non-motorized or cycling route map in our comprehensive plan that identifies on-road versus off-road routes, and it includes the entirety of Bay Street through downtown, off street, as well as multiple other networks. And so we're just going to be updating our transportation element. And so if anything on this map is not right, we would certainly invite you to participate in the 2024 comprehensive plan update to provide input on specifically the non-motorized transportation element.
Perfect.
So we'd like to thank you for that great roundabout you have on Tremont. It's very well laid out. It's we've ridden it several times. It's quite an asset at that intersection.
Well, thank you. We've got plans for many more.
They work.
They do.
Okay, well, are we ready to go on to our next agenda item?
Should we leave?
Okay, thank you. Beck, are
Thank
you
you.
ready?
Were you taking it to me, or did you want to finish that update section?
You're next. We'll do the updates after your survey.
Okay, okay. I will have Chris put up, there we go. And then if we could, can you guys read that? I had asked Chris to send this out, and it was late, it was this morning. But I was just going to review with you the Peninsula RTPO's legislative informational piece that we did last year. And this built on what we had done for the 2021 session. And I'm going to go over this and review our successes, and then we will go over the survey for this coming year. But the first item that we had last year that we spoke to our legislators about, which was a continuation from the previous session, was that the RPTO supported a fair and balanced transportation revenue package, a transportation package focusing also on the revenue aspect. If you would go down to the last couple sentences in that one area, it says, our members must compete for useful but unpredictable grants to support our core programs, as well as major improvements and retrofits. And we ask them to mitigate those effects and create a more sustainable, predictable local revenue stream with a comprehensive multimodal transportation package. And then, as we know, you've gone way too far, Chris. Just stay up to that first page there. So what we know is the legislature did put through the Moving Ahead Washington package. And in that particular package was a provision that I know that you've spoke about, is the 0.1% sales tax. And the Peninsula RPTO sees that as a meeting the needs that we had asked here. One of the things that we had spoke with our legislators about is the backlog of maintenance projects that all of our jurisdictions has. And we can relate that to Port Orchard in that the pavement management system that we had created a few years back called for $1 million a year if we were to bring our streets up to the appropriate level. And so we saw this 0.1% a councilmatic revenue source as meeting this requirement for us, understanding that our jurisdictions will use it differently. I know that Port Orchard has been talking about using it for Bethel Phase 1. That is, a great use of those funds. And then I would hope in the outer years, we would use that for some of our neighborhood streets. I know that that's a way to fund that. I think, Mayor, we've been putting aside maybe $500,000 a year for preventive maintenance out of our budget. So anyway, so we kind of think that that particular item that we supported last year was addressed by the legislature. We go down to the second item, and it's advocating more Department of Transportation input earlier into the funding process. And this is because what we have right now is the legislature is making a lot of funding decisions. And it seems like for our statewide system, in coordination with our rural system, that more parties need to be at the table talking about that before they actually come through with a list of projects. Since they came up with Moving Ahead Washington, we feel this is something that still needs to be addressed, but can happen over the next few years or next period of time, because the legislature is not probably going to put through another package next year. We go down to the third one, and we were requesting a year ago that we had a rare opportunity with the federal infrastructure package for the RTPOs and the other various organizations to work together to figure out how we were going to distribute those funds. Well, that didn't happen. That ship has sailed. Mayor Patonsu was part of that process. And so it happened as it has in the past. And it gives something that for your consideration, we would like to bring forward an earlier collaborative cooperation when we have another federal package to distribute. So that gets us down to the fourth item on our page 1 last year. And this is something that probably will not affect Kitsap, but it is very important for the rural counties throughout the state. As you all know, it is more expensive and more difficult administratively and to deal with federal dollars rather than state dollars. And we promote, I should say that our jurisdictions are promoting swapping federal dollars with state dollars. And to give you an example of that, Mason County only gets about $450,000 a year and of federal dollars. And when you divide that among Mason County, Mason Transit, the city of Shelton, the port of Shelton, none of those awards are very great. And when you put the federal requirements on it, it makes it very expensive to use that money. We have rural counties in the state that get less than $200,000 a year. So we are hoping that we can work with DOT and get them to swap the federal dollars that we have to us with their.
I have an update on that. I forgot to mention that was the third victory we got in the Jobs Act committee that I was in. Is the legislature says they will put into this a pilot program for just we advocated for that for swap. So there should be a pilot program for these type of swaps. You won't be dollar for dollar because the states, we wanted it dollar for dollar, but the senator said that it would likely be, they're going to take a little bit for the inconvenience of managing the federal dollars, but is what it is.
So anyway, so that's great news. That's great news. I know that some of our jurisdictions will be very glad to hear that. So those were our front page requests last year. If you scroll down, Chris, just to the next page, the others are items that we had talked to the legislature about before. We're still on our radar, but as you can see from the front page, we felt we had movement on those 4 items. The rest of these talk about making sure that we continue and our legislators continue to fund the Connecting Washington projects. We have projects out there from Connecting Washington, we're in the later years that still haven't received their funding, and we do not want to lose those. The next item is ferry vessel replacement and just the ferry system as a whole. That's very important to many of our communities. Obviously, Kitsap County and Port Townsend really relies on ferry traffic. And then we go down and we talk about expanded EV readiness, and we talk about resiliency in that last bullet point there for the peninsula. Both peninsulas. When Highway 101 is closed, it's very difficult to get around the Olympic Peninsula. We have Highway 112, which goes out to the Makah tribe. It is closed a lot. We need to address resiliency, whatever that looks like. So those were some of our highlights from last year. If you go to scroll down a little bit, Chris, to the next page. We have on the next page, these are graphs that we did 2 years ago, and we recycled them last year. We probably will not recycle them this year unless the committee chooses to, but there's interesting information here for people who are new to the Transportation Committee. That first graph shows that the residents of our 4 counties get less in return for the dollars they put into the state transportation system than they get back. And you can see that Kitsap is the lowest there, and that's because they count our ferry tolls and our bridge tolls in that. So it's expensive, as we know, to live on the Kitsap Peninsula for transportation regions. We also highlighted in the graph below that how transportation projects equate to jobs and are an economic driver for us. If you go down to the next page, Chris, and this will stay in, I'm sure, our folio. Each of our jurisdictions is allowed to offer a project that they want to highlight to our legislators. And Port Orchard has always participated in this. This list is not prioritized at all by the RTPO. The only prioritization is what the individual jurisdictions want to bring forward and show. Okay, so that's kind of the work we've done before. Hey,
Beck, is there an opportunity to add any? Chris and I had a conversation earlier, or an email string earlier today, to highlight 2 or 3 Port Orchard projects in this list. Is that?
You've already got 2, I think.
Do we? Okay, got
Yes,
it. The print's small. There's the Bay Street pedestrian path. I do see it.
And you've got Sedgwick on there.
Okay, those are relevant. Okay.
Right. We offer all of our jurisdictions to bring something forward, and it's kind of space contingent. And usually I think we have 2 pages. I don't know if I only printed 1 here. But yeah, so yes, Port Orchard does participate in that.
I think it would, I mean, we've got the pathway pretty well figured out. I would recommend maybe we swap out Bethel Phase 1 for the pathway potentially on this lift if you're looking at, and I would ask for others. I mean, we've got the Bay Street Road project, but I think we've got that largely paid for, and we already have a bucket of federal dollars. We're not going to be able to get another bite of federal dollars to bridge that gap, but we are looking for some grant opportunities to help us with the funding gap on Bethel Phase 1.
Yeah, and this again, the way this process works is the RPTO has a subcommittee, the legislative work group, and we got together here a week or so ago, reviewed our successes last year and discussed some items we thought would be relevant for this year, which is what we're going to go over now. And then we will take that to our board in August, and we will say, this is our preliminary work. Do you want to add anything to it? Do you want to reshuffle the deck? What do you want that to look like? And then after that happens, we will put out the call to all of our jurisdictions for projects they want to highlight on this list. So you will definitely be included in that. And Chris has offered this the last couple of years. He's supplied this information for us.
Perfect. Thank you.
And maybe, Mayor, what we could do is modify Sedgwick Road to include Sedgwick Bethel, more like our study. So it's comprehensive of all that. And then that positions us to advocate for funding as well as the state.
Yeah, we've been consistent in an ask though for the interchange. And I think the interchange is the work. We're struggling to get 12, 8 or 10 million. And if we make the scope bigger, I don't know that we're likely to be even less successful.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, Chris, if you want to put up now this is what we've just seen, and that I think Chris emailed to you is last year's what we call our legislative folio. Now, what I have is a really elementary list of questions that we received later this afternoon for the survey. But so what we've been asked to do is this first group here are things that we asked for last year. And then the second group enhances some of those, and some of it's new information, enhances some of those, rephrases it a little bit differently. But we've been asked to rate these high, medium, and low of importance to us. And then we get to have 2 surveys submitted, one from the RPTO Executive Board, which is me. So I will, when we complete this, I will submit the survey. And then we're also asking the technical folks to submit. And the technical folks may or may not agree with the policy folks. I mean, they may look at it a little differently, and our group will look at that before we put together the informational sheet. Again, we do not lobby at all. We simply provide education to our legislators. So going down those first 3 questions, to support a fair and balanced transportation revenue package, advocate for DOT earlier in the process, and get input ahead of time for the new funding programs. Those have all, I think, kind of happened. And I think that we don't need to stress those again immediately. I personally would like to see those in maybe a comment section indicating that we would like to see collaborative and cooperative discussions happen on the front side of some of these issues. But then we get down to the swap of federal funds with state funds for more efficient delivery of small local projects. Now, the mayor has just told us that's going to have a pilot program. But my question is, how would we rate that as high, medium, and low, for Port Orchard?
I think it's important, but it's going to happen.
Well, no, you say that, and that is that they've been working on this for many years. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah,
Although they have
Roger
the
Millar
pilot
was
project.
opposed in the
Pardon?
meetings. Roger Millar was opposed.
Exactly.
And
One of their concerns is they think that we want to swap federal funds for state funds so that we do not have to follow federal guidelines. And that's not the case. It's just that they're too expensive and cumbersome to deal with.
It's the audit requirements. It's all of that. Yeah, we tried to educate we got a commitment. We will, in the next 45 to 60 days, we will get the report that from that IIJA work group. And that is one of the things that was committed to us from the legislature. Now, until it gets in the report, and I think we're going to need to monitor to make sure that as this pilot program is created, that we get what it functions the way we want it to, and not what the state wants it to. And AWSC will be a part of that.
I think what we want to say on that is, I don't know that the swap of state funds for federal funds will impact Port Orchard that much, because our federal dollars are typically larger. But so I would maybe give that a medium, meaning it's not particularly high for us, but we understand for the region it has value.
I don't disagree with that.
Is that acceptable to everyone?
That sounds good to me.
Okay. And then the next item here is support completion of the Connecting Washington projects.
We have one, the pathway.
Right, so that's
important to us.
okay. That's high for us.
That money doesn't get pulled from us at the 11th hour.
Right, and that's exactly what we're talking about here, right? And then support the replacement of ferry vessels, and I may change that to just support the ferry service in any way. How do we feel about that one?
Yeah, I mean, we're being impacted by lack of crews and our ferry service being cut in half. It's very important to us on the peninsula.
Okay, so we get that a high.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then support EV readiness in rural and tribal communities.
I think it's good for the region, but I don't know that it affects Port Orchard.
Yeah, I was thinking it doesn't affect us specifically.
Directly, yeah.
Right, I'm going to give that a medium rather than a low. And then improve the resiliency of the region's transportation system.
I think Gorst is a prime example of,
right.
It's a high priority for us, because if we don't fix Gorst and have a more robust and resilient road system, we're going to lose transportation alternatives.
Okay, and then continue to support universal broadband access, especially in rural and tribal communities. I don't know that we have this issue in our jurisdiction, but we have jurisdictions in the RTPO, which, Mark, if you're not familiar, it's Clallam, Jefferson, Kitsap, and Mason counties. We have some rural areas that don't have broadband, and mainly the Makah. Our tribal members have very spotty broadband, as well as some places in Mason County and even West Jefferson County. So
I'm speaking too much, so I'm going to just butt out.
I am too, and you know, and I realize Mark and Fred haven't been necessarily that involved with this, and I don't think that's low. But again, it's not top of mind for us in Port Orchard.
Yeah, it's not an issue for us in Port Orchard or South Kitsap,
Right.
I don't think.
Right.
Maybe
I
in
would agree with
Walla.
that.
And then the other, when we get down to this next session, it's more new things. What we talked about is its current tax structure and funding mechanisms result in unfair trade-off between transportation and essential government services. Meaning that we still, in order for us to maintain our streets, it competes with parks, it competes with our police department, it competes with everything. And what our conversation at the work group went to is the 0.1% we were very grateful for. I'm hoping our jurisdictions take advantage of that. It's an opportunity for them. But the bottom line is, you do the 0.1%, your mental health district is going to want money. They're going to attach a sales tax. That's just the way our tax structure works in the state. And before you know it, we're going to have a sales tax. It's 12-13%. And so I think what we were asking for here is for them to look at the current tax structure and get us out of competing with ourselves, because all of those things are important to us. We don't want to give up mental health. We don't want to give up public health. We don't want to give up, that much. But we're competing with ourselves for those same dollars. So that was that discussion. And I open that up to you guys and let me know if you want it low, medium, or high.
I think it needs to be looked at because transit's competing for those dollars. There's just, you're right, we're competing against ourselves, and there's, you got to be conscious of what are our neighbors doing? Are we creating an unfair disadvantage to our businesses because the neighboring community doesn't have as high a sales tax because they don't want to fund these types of things, and all of a sudden people are making major purchases outside your community and hurting your businesses.
It all comes back to the gas tax isn't working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
No, it is not. The gas taxes, and Noah, I don't know if he's there or paying attention, but I sat down with Noah the other day here a month or so ago, and our gas tax in the city of Port Orchard is pretty much flat. And Mark, I don't know if you're aware of this, but gas tax is distributed based on population. And so even though we grow, how are we growing proportionately with other jurisdictions? And we are trying to move people out of gas consuming vehicles into electric vehicles. We're encouraging them to get into transit. So that particular revenue source, although it's flat in Port Orchard right now, long-term will probably decline. If the legislature ever does anything with a road usage charge that is also designed to not increase, it's designed to diminish over time, because we have an RCW reducing vehicle miles traveled by a significant percentage. And right now I'm not remembering the percentage or the date, but there's a percentage by 2030 it needs to be reduced, and another one further out. So even if they were to institute that, it's not going to be a long-term solution for us. It would be a temporary solution. So what I heard the mayor say is that's kind of a high priority for us, for them to look at the tax structure. I may have misheard that. Mark, I see you undid your microphone. So
no, I would agree, because it seems like we're having an increase in competition for these dollars and a lowering number of bank deposits for those dollars that are available. So yeah, it needs to be a high priority, or at least medium high priority, in my opinion.
okay. Are you on board with that, Fred?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay. Then the next one is local agencies need funding mechanisms to support preservation of neighborhood streets and local roads. The discussion we had on this, I keep going back to that 0.1%. I think that's what the legislator was trying to get to. But the discussion that we had at the work group centered around, again, our neighborhood streets. And Chris, you can perhaps get a little more technical on this, but I was informed at that meeting that the strength or the depth of the pavement on a neighborhood street is less than it is on one of our arterials, because it just doesn't have the same type of traffic on it. And so what some of our jurisdictions are concerned about is the volume of delivery trucks on our neighborhood streets now. The road in front of my house probably serves my neighbors and I really well, but I tell you what, there's a half a dozen or more delivery trucks up here every day. And so that was the concern, is the way our shopping has evolved, it's making an impact on our local streets. So even these pavement management systems, some of us has invested in, may be not as accurate as they used to be because of the type of traffic on our neighborhood streets now. So anyway, I put that out with a little background for discussion. Hearing none, I will I will assume we're not real excited about that.
It's a problem. There's no doubt about it. I don't know what the solution is. I know I'm advocating for because we're going to use that 1/10 potentially for Bethel.
Right.
For a slight increase in our utility taxes and carving a chunk of our existing utility tax and put it into a dedicated street preservation fund. And I think we can get close to $1.5 million a year and really start to move the needle on our streets.
Okay, okay. I am not on the council anymore and I don't get to vote and you guys don't care about my opinion, but I'm going to give it anyway. And that is when you do this 0.1%. And I'm supportive of that. I think it's important. But I do hope that you institute it for the entire 10 years, because I think that's the only way we're going to get out of our transportation problems.
Completely agree. And I think we need to do another 10 years after that and another 10 years after that if it's still available.
Right. And I think if you do if you exercise the 0.2% for a construction project, I think you have to look at those dollars separately than the 1/10. But I will get off my soapbox on that. So do you want me to give, I don't care if we give everything mediums or everything highs. I don't know that we have to give any lows out here. But I'm hearing that we need to be able to address the change in traffic in our neighborhoods.
I think it's at least medium. I'm just wondering what other funding mechanism would there be to preserve neighborhood streets and local roads? I mean,
they would
bicycle apps, what are we talking about?
No, it would be my guess. And I don't know, I'm just pulling this out of the air. When they talked about it, my mind went to they would do some sort of surcharge on Prime or on Amazon and FedEx and UPS. And some of the other delivery people that are using our streets, that they would have to offset that use.
Oh.
Yeah, the fleet charge. I think they're called
Like
fleet
a
charges or something.
freight surcharge?
It's on it'd be on the car tab, actually, I believe for the weight of a vehicle, on the vehicle weights traveling on the, that's one of the proposals I heard.
Yeah, gross vehicle weight, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just don't stop Amazon from driving to my doorstep.
Exactly.
I've grown accustomed to this.
We can't let that happen. Okay. Going down, greater coordination with DOT. What is the LEAP process, Chris? Yeah. Chris may not be there. I'm not sure what the LEAP process is.
I don't know if I've heard of that either.
Okay, so we may not answer. Yeah. The next one is advocate for the timely delivery of moving ahead Washington funding packages. That is the same as connecting Washington. If the legislature has approved these projects, the jurisdictions are getting ready for these projects. So we have to make sure that they get funded. And this was huge, and it's 16 years out there, but it does include $75 million for Gorst.
I
So,
personally think that's a high priority. We've been fighting with the Gorst issue for 20 plus years now. And to sit on it for the next 5 or 6 years while they plan away and then decide which ways they're going to take the funding to other locations, that's not good. We need to show something for our citizens, for the county and the city, more quickly than that.
I agree. So I made that a high. And then we get down to VMT-based transportation funding mechanism can have undue impact on rural communities. Again, that's vehicle miles traveled. And I don't know how much it would affect us in Port Orchard, but some of our rural communities, if they go to a road usage charge, some of our rural communities travel a long distance to get to where they're going. Like say you're in Forks and you have to go to Port Angeles. I mean, if they have electric vehicles, it's going to cost them more to drive than it is for me to drive from my house to Safeway. I mean, again, that's just something I think is in support of our neighbors.
I don't think it's our priority because they're driving more.
Right. What it's going to do is it's going to discourage them from getting electric vehicles. And that's okay. But again, I don't think it affects Port Orchard. And the next one either, ensure that the EV infrastructure requirements that are appropriate for rural areas. Apparently there are chargers that you can put on like telephone poles that, may work just fine in the rural areas, rather than having the elaborate infrastructure that some of the other places will have.
I don't see that as being a real high priority.
For us.
Again, for us here.
Yeah. And I will, when I complete the survey, there's a place for comments, and I will say that we made our answers based on priorities for Port Orchard and not necessarily the region as a whole. The next one is create more funding opportunities. Create more funding opportunities for important local planning projects that lead to capital or program investments. Now, the way this is phrased, I'm remembering it a little different in our discussion, but the conversation I heard was and let's just think of Tremont when we think of this. Think of Tremont, there's a project in Sequim, the Simdar Road interchange, which is a big deal up there. But for Tremont, we got money for planning and we got money for right of way. And then all of a sudden the rules changed and where are we going to get money for construction? And I know that was an all hands on deck and selling our souls to finish the Tremont project. So what the concern is here is that we have funding opportunities that we know we can take from point A to the completion of the project, point B, so that you're not hanging out there at the last minute. Where am I going to get the construction dollars? If that was the concern. The concern is jurisdictions can put a lot of money into planning. They can buy right of way, but they don't have any guarantee that they're going to get construction dollars because all of that is competitive. And we all have to, and Mark, I don't know if you've been involved with this, you have to piecemeal a lot of your funding together. And the question becomes, or sometimes you may get a grant for a certain amount of money that you're getting grant A, you're putting it with grant B, but there may be some hiccup and all of a sudden the timing runs out on A. And then you can't use B either. What the group was looking for was some assurances that they can have predictable funding for their projects.
Good luck with that.
I don't.
You know, I think the lesson learned from Tremont was you got to be really careful taking a federal dollar for right of way and design. And we're working very hard to do that with our local dollars. And you know, the finance department, they love complex projects that have half a dozen funding sources and different rules. They live for that stuff. I know they do.
You know, and I can appreciate some of our jurisdictions. Again, we're talking Clallam, Jefferson, Mason counties here, and they don't have that big of a.
I think they just need to go through the RTPO to make sure that they kind of all have, I'm using the wrong word here, gentleman's agreement, that, you know, some way to kind of assure each other that if they do those things, they're going to stay committed to them the best they can. And then,
okay, now you.
Then the, you know, the other thing is that the, you know, if we can get these rural communities to get state dollars rather than federal dollars, boy, that makes things so much simpler.
That makes it a lot
That would be
simpler.
the biggest thing to accomplish, I think, for them.
Now, for the information of this committee, because you may not be aware of it, because you are used to Kitsap's federal dollars coming through PSRC. And with PSRC, they have a sophisticated award system. It's all competitive, and we go through all of that. And we're given so much for Kitsap, and then we do so much regionally. Our other counties, because they are not part of an MPO, they get their money direct. Okay, there is none of this runs through the RTPO. They get their money direct. Clallam County gets $1 million, $1.2 million a year to disperse. Jefferson County gets about 450. Mason County gets about 800. And if you think of Clallam County, they get a little over $1 million. They have to disperse that. Fort Squim, Port Angeles, Clallam County, Clallam Transit, Port of Port Angeles, and about 5 different tribes. So the money is really.
There's not enough peanut butter in that jar.
No, there is not enough peanut butter in that jar. Now, one thing that I'll just say here, what the RPTO has done is we've worked with local programs and made our other 3 counties aware that they can, what we call, program ahead. So Clallam County, instead of doing $1 million a year like they have been, they can actually program ahead 4 years and award $4 million. They just have to make sure they meet their obligation deadlines. So that will allow them to do bigger projects and have a little more peanut butter to spread at one time. But we don't know if the counties will take advantage of that or not, but we worked hard to make sure that they could do that without getting their hands slapped. So I guess that one that says create more funding opportunities, I'm going to put good luck with that. That's what the mayor said.
That's good.
Sure.
Okay, and now this next one, it says provide more adequate base funding for the rural RTPOs. Our RTPO is funded exclusively with the money we get from the state legislature. There are no dues or anything. It's just exactly what we get from the state. They give us about, I don't know off the top of my head, maybe $150,000 a year to do all of our work program. And there are some of our RTPOs that would like more money than that. And is that a high priority for us? I can tell you for our RPTO, it is not a high priority because we're able to manage our work program quite well within our current budget. There are other RTPOs that do not have the same luxury that we do. So I think I know more about that. And I would, personally, I would say that would be low on our list.
Sounds good.
And I say that because I saw something just the other day that they were going to ask the legislature for $750,000 over the next biennium. And there are however many RTPOs in the state, and PSRC was going to get more than half of the money, and the rest of it was going to trickle down to the rest of it and not be effective for anyone. So I wasn't excited about that. So, well, PSRC has like a $32 million budget. You know, what's $350,000 for them? It doesn't move a decimal point anywhere. So I can see the mayor's got a grimace on his face. Okay, that's what I have. I thank you very much for your time. I will complete the survey. There's one other thing I made a note here that I may introduce at the meeting, and that was the conversation that Paul Ducky talked about complete streets and reminded us that if you have a project of more than $500,000, it has to be a complete street. And, you know, we can probably accommodate that really well within our city, but some of our rural areas, I'm not sure, I'm sure most of you have driven out the Key Peninsula. I mean, can you imagine a complete street going down the Key Peninsula? You know, I'm not sure what that really needs to look like in our rural areas. And so I may introduce that as something that they would like to talk about.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for your presentation and your questions.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Beck.
Hey, Fred, in the interest of time, I think we can drop hot topics until September. So
Okay.
we'll focus the remainder of our time on Bethel Phase 1. And I just wanted to make everybody aware, you know, and before the 9th here of August, that we're coming with a professional services agreement to get going on that. It'll be for $624,000, and it gets us through 60%, so we can start right away. The other thing is with the application, the grant application for a TIB Urban Arterials Program. After working with the consultant and thinking a little bit about the number of parcels we have to acquire and how things have gone on Bay Street, our costs, not so much on the consultant side, but on the right-of-way side and the construction side, with the way things are trending, we put in quite a bit higher numbers than in our tip. So just don't be surprised by that. I think our tip is about 7.4 million, and I think I've got the total project cost 14.8 million now. So it is quite a change. I just want you to be aware of that. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Noah and the mayor to talk about the funding ideas they have for Phase 1.
Oh, I didn't realize we had a speaking part. So I think everybody's up. So Chris just spoke about Bethel Phase 1, and that's that 1/10. I think we're talking about the 1/10 measure. You guys have gotten the recent presentation that Noah did. Noah this evening will share that timeline. I don't know if he's prepared to share it to this committee. It wouldn't hurt. And he'll share that tonight on when we feel we can get those dollars, remember? And I think he's got two different alternatives. One that gets us to a receiving dollars likely January 1st, and another one at the end of the first quarter or the beginning of the second quarter. So, you know, we're moving ahead with the design aspect of it. Tonight, we have a grant application, a letter, an ordinance for support. We can pull that. We plan to pull that tonight. We don't need it now. And we've learned that when we need it is if and when we get the award. So we're applying for a $3 million grant to help us with that gap in Bethel. And if we get, you know, $2.5 million, hopefully $3 million, then we'll need the council to pass a resolution of support that we're committed to funding the project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Noah.
Yeah, so I was just going to brief the Transportation Committee with the presentation we're going to provide tonight. Hopefully you can see my screen here. brief slideshow, shortest I got. And here's essentially what we've identified is working our way backwards. So with a target date of implementation January 1st, 2023 for this TBD 1/10 sales tax, we would have to have all our required documents to the Department of Revenue by October 14th. So again, working backwards, it would make sense to, at the upcoming August 9th meeting, provide the council a draft ordinance of what that TBD 1 cent sales tax looks like for discussion. And then at the next council meeting, depending on how the council wants to do this, or transportation wants to recommend doing this, our attorneys have confirmed we do not have to hold a public hearing. But what I heard at the last council meeting that we do want to do public outreach or have at least a public discussion for. At this point, I have identified as a public hearing on the ordinance imposing the 1/10 sales tax at the first meeting in September. And again, we could then take public comment, build that into our work study session where we could have an additional public hearing, any comments, suggestions, changes, anything the council wants to opine on. All this teeing up for a September 27th end of month adoption of the ordinance for the 1/10 sales tax in order for us then to get the documents routed to Department of Revenue by October 14th for implementation and collection to begin on January 2023. So this is the first timeline we laid out. The other piece is that if the council decides to go with this timeline and plan, again, where we sit today here at July 20, where we at 26th, 27th, gives us essentially the next 2 months, August and September, to discuss doing this. And I know we have quite most of the month of August off. I just want to point out that you have 2 months to kind of think about it. The other benefit of going with this timeline is that we can then fold in the revenue projections into the 23-24 biennial budget, and we can start to plan accordingly. If we don't hit this timeline, or the council decides, hey, we don't want to implement in the Q1 in 2023, we want to target Q2, that Q2 is the next opportunity to have that tax go into effect. And we would do a similar exercise and work backwards. But essentially, the tax would go into effect April 1st, 2023. I would expect DOR to kind of need their documents by the end of this year, so by the end of December. So that only pushes us out into maybe October, November as far as monthly council meetings to hear and then adopt. So it doesn't move the timeline a whole lot if we wait to Q2. So I just want to take that for the Transportation Committee to discuss. And I don't know if you guys want to bring a recommendation tonight, but I was just going to lay out the timeline as well tonight for the full council.
So Noah, one challenge I see in what you've laid out is you're opening a public hearing on the 13th. We don't typically take public testimony or wouldn't continue a hearing on September 20th. I think it'd be completely appropriate to have a discussion item on the 20th at that work study, but I think we would continue that public hearing and then have the adoption on the 27th. Yeah, because it's just not the norm. We don't normally have public testimony in a work study.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair, Mayor. I was just trying to incorporate the public element because again, our attorneys confirmed we do not have to hold a public hearing on it. So I was trying to introduce the public element, but I like that approach. Take it off here, and it can be a continuation, or we could just hold and close the public hearing at the first meeting and have adoption at the second. Up to the council.
Our typical practice is to open it and then continue it, and we could keep it on the 20th as a discussion item.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we get testimony on the 13th that we hear something we want to talk about. So that gives us an opportunity for a 15-20 minute discussion and then continue that public hearing on the September 27th and then potentially take action.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Hey, no, I've got two things. First off, you're giving yourself about 2 weeks to get all the required documents together into the DOR and accepted by the DOR. Is that a reasonable time frame for you?
Well, we would bring all the required documents to the council for adoption on the September 27th. If it's consistent and the process is similar how we do our property tax, we are then taking those adopted documents after the mayor signed and they've gone into effect and then submitting those to DOR. So I believe that's enough time from the 27th to the 14th because I'm going to have the whole package ready to go. as long as the mayor is available to sign and then submit, DOR should be willing to take those.
Okay, great. And the second thing, can you give us a pro con for wanting to push this off till the end of the first quarter versus taking action on it quicker?
Well, I think that's a good council discussion. I guess for me, when I looked at the calendar, you don't gain a lot in months. Again, I would expect there to be action taken in December. And again, we have one meeting early in December. So you're going to target that December meeting for the final action and build in a couple weeks for DOR. So you really only got 1 month, maybe October, November, that would allow you for more time to engage with the public, or whatever the reason we want to kind of allow for more time. So right now we're sitting in July, that'd give us 4 months. I'm not sure what the council would like us to accomplish, present more, do more in those 4 months that we won't be able to do in 2, aside from budgeting for more time. The other piece to think about is we'll be right in the middle of kind of budget discussions in September and October. So most of the discussions we're going to have is going to be go into a lot of detail on the biennial budget. So I don't know if this discussion won't get lost a little bit if you get yourself caught up in October.
So those are Noah's spot on. It's really, are you comfortable moving this fast? We can deliver, but are you comfortable moving this fast?
The only question I have is what type of outreach is intended? For example, who are the stakeholders? Is there any way that letters could be sent to major retailers to make sure that they're aware of it in case they want to give input?
Not really. I mean, we're going to do.
Or are we just planning on doing like Facebook and a press release and expecting to just sort of hear about it through the grapevine? I think a proactive letter to stakeholders would be helpful, and I'm not expecting to hear from them, but then they can't come back and say that nobody ever told them, the way the realtors and the builders are complaining. If we just send them a little letter, it's like at least they'll have the opportunity to know about it.
So how difficult, Noah, would it be for you to develop a database from our sales tax providers? I'm not certain.
I don't know how well a direct mailer to all our retailers, how effective that would be, I guess I would say. I mean, of course, once this is all adopted and approved, DOR is going to reach out to them and give them notification. We'd want to give them notification just so they implement it correctly. But the retailers are really going to, they're passing on the tax rate. The consumer is paying the tax rate.
Yeah, not the retailer. It's our citizens that are paying it.
They just need to know what to implement.
The shoppers in the greater South Kitsap area that are visiting
Yeah.
the city of Port Orchard and spend their money.
Fine. I just heard earlier that we're concerned about the major retailers and people shopping for large items in other jurisdictions. So maybe those people would want to weigh in on something like this.
I think that what my concern, Fred, is if I don't know that 1/10 would do that, but if we went out to the voters and asked for 2/10 or 3/10, and you could buy a car in Bremerton for 0.3 of a cent less than sales tax, that's probably going to drive somebody, if they can find a car, to go buy that car or that RV somewhere else. I don't know that 1/10 is going to move that needle, but I think 2 or 3/10 could influence behavior. That's kind of, maybe I didn't articulate.
Like a chamber of commerce or other business groups that we could maybe do outreach to. At least
I think the chamber is a good. We're going to do our typical things, but people have got to want to engage in the process.
Well, yeah, but I agree with Fred in so much that we need to do our, as you used, Mayor, our typical things, but we need to always continue to be looking for better ways, more effective ways to getting public outreach and comments back from them. If we do our due diligence and they don't reply, we've done our due diligence. We're trying to do better, but we're in a position where I think we can set ourselves up for additional successes when we go for a 2/10 or down the road, if we put our due diligence into this one now and get that public outreach out there and try to do better than we've done in the past.
I hear you. On Noah's timeline here, though, too, I would recommend that we continue that public hearing on the 27th. So that we
I
have
agree.
two
Yeah,
opportunities for public hearing.
Yeah.
So it's a continuation of the public hearing.
Yeah, and I
Dawn,
like your idea, Rob, of giving it a week to think about. Maybe we talk about it at work study, but not bringing in a public hearing section during our work study time. I like that idea myself.
Agreed. Definitely agreed.
But I think that the major one, the service, the organization that most businesses are a part of or should be a part of is the Chamber of Commerce. So I think it's that, that's our above and beyond, is making sure that, and I know Matt knows about this, but having another conversation with Matt, hey, and putting out our press releases are, and I'm certain that the Sun or the Independent should be willing to write articles. I mean, we'll send them a press release, but they got to do their part too.
And Rob, that's good. I think I'm just thinking of maybe a dozen car dealers. I know we don't have that many. And the big boxes. I mean, the big boxes are not going to respond. We know that, but at least we can know that we sent them a letter about it. And that's all that I'm just suggesting. The rest of the council may not think that it is necessary. That's something I wanted to bring up.
Are we discriminating though if we're providing different notification to a larger business versus a smaller business?
Well, and again, the comment was made earlier. I can't remember who said it, but the big box, small box, whoever it is, they're just going to be passing that on. So I don't really think it's that important either to go to the retailers at this point either, because again, it's a pass through. It's more to our citizens that we have the responsibility to.
Yeah, that's who we answer to, and they're the ones paying this, indirectly, and not actually directly. They're paying it at the grocery store or the hardware store.
So Mayor, if you want, we could add additional efforts in August, and I'll just kind of leave the date open.
I think it's ahead of, I think it's after, August, even it's after the discussion on the 10th or 11th,
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of gathering what you guys are looking for, kind of posting on Facebook. What other type of outreach efforts do you want to?
I would say post on,
Website.
Also press release.
Website.
Press release.
Also media outreach.
Yeah.
Rob will do an interview with the major media.
If they ask. And then I would say communication with the Chamber of Commerce. So it's not after a council meeting, August to be determined, but it's not a council meeting.
Yeah, sorry.
That looks good. Thank you. That makes me happy.
Versus saying Facebook,
yeah.
could we say social media? So we're not, it is Facebook, but
Social media sounds better.
yeah.
They're not going to do something on TikTok.
Yeah, Rob's going to do a dance on TikTok.
Something catchy to get people involved.
Yeah, there we go.
So we're a little bit over time here. We're over past 6 o'clock. So.
Yes, we definitely
You gotta
are.
get going.
Okay.
I gotta get to the city hall.
Thank you for attending.
So you guys, are you guys comfortable making a recommendation of this plan to the
Sure.
council?
Yep.
Yeah.
So Noah can say that in his report that the committee reviewed this and recommended the outline plan.
The timeline presented, yes.
Sounds
All
good to me.
I'm sticking around. I thought I'd maybe go grab dinner and come back in an hour. You don't need me till later in council, right?
I'm not certain. What item are you speaking on?
2
Are
issues into the meeting.
Splash pad.
Splash pad? Okay. Yeah, we've got a presentation, so you could probably show up 30 minutes into the meeting easily.
Okay, thank you.
And just
Wish
come
we
around
could do that.
come up the back stairwell and kind of sneak into over on that side versus right through the middle of the room.
Got it. Appreciate the tip.
Okay, see you guys in 20 minutes.
Yep, bye.
Thank you.